Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Claire Van Blaricum, and I will be the moderator of tonight's forum. The League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara, together with our co-sponsors, the League of Women Voters of the Santa Maria Valley, the Santa Barbara Goleta Valley branch of AAUW, the Future Leaders of America, and the Future Leaders of America, are sponsoring tonight's forum for the candidates for California's Assembly 37th District. We're coming to you live from the Santa Barbara Women's Club, whom we thank for their cooperation in making this space safe and available. We hope this forum will inform you, the voters, of the candidates' views on issues of interest to you. Note that the League neither supports nor opposes any candidate or political party. Thanks to Olivia Uribe Mutal of Transilpro, who will be providing simultaneous interpretation from English to Spanish. Thanks also to Gary Atkins Sound Systems for the audio, and to Television Santa Barbara, TVSB, for live streaming the forum on the League's Facebook page and recording it for later viewing on YouTube via the Santa Barbara League's website, lwvsantabarbara, all one word, .org. In case I forget to remind you at the end, we have a critical election coming up November 8th. You can check to make sure that your voter registration is up to date, your address, etc. is correct, at voterstatus.sos.ca.gov. If it needs to be updated, you can re-register to vote at registertovote, all one word, .ca.gov. All registered voters in California will receive a ballot in the mail, so be sure to register by the October 24th deadline in order to receive your ballot packet in the mail. Please remember to vote. We are very pleased that we have a live audience tonight. In the interest of time, we ask that those of you here in person please hold any applause or reactions until the break and then until the end of the forum. All of you are welcome to join the League and to make a tax-deductible contribution in order to finance voter education programs such as this. Go to our Santa Barbara League of Women Voters website at lwvsantabarbara, all one word, .org in order to do that, or visit our membership table at the back of the room. Before we begin, we need to describe for you what the 37th Assembly District is now. It has changed following the 2020 decennial redistricting. The final map of the 37th Assembly District from the California Citizens Redistricting Commission shows how it is expanded to the north to encompass all of Santa Barbara County, plus a small portion of southern San Luis Obispo County, including Nipomo and Los Berros. And it has lost the part of Ventura County that it once included. Because of the boundary changes, there is no incumbent for the 2022 election. Both candidates for State Assembly, representing the recently drawn 37th District, are here with us this evening, Greg Hart and Mike Stoker. Thank you for attending and for running for office. Here is how the forum will work. Okay, I'll allow that, but please do hold your applause from this point on. Time is critical. We use the traditional League of Women Voters process and ground rules, which both candidates have agreed to follow. To maintain civility and the issue-oriented nature of our forum, we do not allow candidates to make negative comments about other candidates' character or qualifications, but rather we ask them to address their own qualifications and vision for office and their views on some issues facing California and the 37th District. We remind you again that this is not a debate, but rather a forum to allow candidates to put forth their views and qualifications. First, each candidate will make a brief opening statement up to 2 minutes. Then I will then ask them questions, giving each candidate a maximum of 1.5 minutes, 90 seconds, to answer. We will rotate the order of the responses. A coin toss was held just prior to the forum to determine the beginning order. A League member will operate the electronic timer, which is at the back of the room. We will take approximately 15-minute break partway through to allow screening and sorting of the questions from the audience. The candidates will answer as many questions as possible within the remaining time available. Please note that we have plenty of questions, and it is not unwelcome to respond briefly or even to agree with your opponent. At the end, Each candidate will have an opportunity to make a closing statement of no more than 2 minutes. So, everybody ready? Let's get started. I'm going to be timing the 2-minute opening and closing statements myself here with a timer. The electronic timer for the question timing is preset. So, the coin toss was won by Greg Hart. So, Mr. Hart, are you ready for your opening statement?
Absolutely.
All right. I am ready to go here. You're on.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. This is really a joy to be in this room with a lot of people, to watch the folks that are watching on television, have an opportunity to meet both of us and hear how we would like to represent you in the California State Assembly. And it's really an honor to have the opportunity to serve as an elected official and to run for this office. I bring to this race a broad range of experiences and careers. I've been an elected official here at the local level. I've been appointed to state commissions. I've had a career as an entrepreneur and a small business owner, and I've also been a policy expert in a regional government agency. And I think the combination of all those experiences really uniquely qualifies me to represent all of us in this newly created Assembly District. I was first involved in politics when I was working with Assemblyman Jack O'Connell as a college student. It was a very formative experience, and I kind of caught the political bug. And as a result of that, I went on to be appointed to the Santa Barbara Planning Commission and then elected ultimately to 4 terms on the Santa Barbara City Council. I have the privilege and honor today to be serving as a representative of the 2nd Supervisorial District for the County of Santa Barbara on the Board of Supervisors. And in addition to that, Governor Gray Davis appointed me to the California Coastal Commission. During that time, when I was serving our community as an elected representative, I also started a family child care business in our home that grew from 6 kids to ultimately 45 children and a staff of 10, and ran that business for 20 years. And I'm really proud that that business continues today, serving children who are experiencing homelessness through the Storyteller local nonprofit organization. In addition, I was the Deputy Executive Director of the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, where I served for many years working on transportation and housing policy.
Thank you. Mr. Stoker, your opening statement, please.
Well, thank you, Claire. I've stepped up for public service 3 times in my life, as a county supervisor in the 80s, as chair of the Ag Labor Relations Board, and most recently as a Southwest Administrator for the United States Environmental Protection Agency, where I was responsible to serve the mission of the EPA to protect public health and the environment for 70 million people in 8 time zones. After a lot of prayer and deliberation, I decided what will inevitably be my last time, and probably in my life, to step up for public service, to be your assemblyman, and the reason is pretty simple. California's headed in the wrong direction. We need a change. You look at what's going on, it's crazy. Cops are under attack for enforcing the law. Parents are under attack for being parents. Small businesses do not have a representative to help them. The victims of crime are often demonized. The criminals are allowed to go free, and we make excuses for them. And I'm going to be an assemblyman that's going to be an advocate and go to Sacramento every day to make sure I have the back of law enforcement, of parents, small business owners, and the taxpayer. I'm also going to fight for some smart energy policies that will lower the price of gas at the pump. And that's not the direction of our majority in the legislature that wants us all to live on sustainable energy and now even wants to take away natural gas. And I'm going to fight for smart water policies that are going to make water more readily available for all California residents, and that includes desalination on the coast and more reservoirs to be built throughout the state. I'm Mike Stoker, and I would be honored and proud to have your support and vote on November 8th. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. We will now start with the questions, and we will be alternating as to who gets to answer each question first. Since Mr. Hart started with the opening statements, Mr. Stoker will be the first to answer the first question. And the first question is, what can the legislature do to encourage innovation and create jobs and vibrant communities?
Well, as I said, I kind of started as a county supervisor to be an advocate for our small businesses that were under attack by the mandates in Santa Barbara County. We turned a lot of that around, and Santa Barbara County became a pretty good business-friendly county for businesses to work with. When you look at the state of California, we're the worst of all the states in passing crazy regulations, rules, and mandates that put our businesses out of business or force them to move to other states. I'm going to fight those mandates, and I'm going to try to remove and delete the ones that are such a negative impact on those businesses. On a positive note, one of the things I was well known for as a county supervisor was public-private partnerships. I'm a firm believer in that, and public-private partnerships working together can do a lot to help create a much better job climate in California. You know, it's pretty telling when we're supposed to be an environmental state, when Tesla, an environmental car company, and that's making electric cars, Elon Musk moves to Austin, Texas, because he can't do business in California. That's the nonsense we have to stop, and that's why I'm stepping up to the plate to be your next assemblyman. And I guarantee, if I'm your assemblyman, small business owners, I'm going to have your back every day I go to Sacramento.
Yes. Mr. Hart, same question. What can the legislature do to encourage innovation and create jobs and vibrant communities?
California is the 5th largest economy in the world. We create more jobs than any other state in the country. We are a tremendous economic power, but obviously the state of the economy right now has many people worried. Prices are increasing, family budgets are strained. There's a lot of concern going forward about the potential for recession. The legislature really needs to focus on long-term investments in our education system, in our transportation infrastructure, and in our energy supply to make sure that we're building the economic foundation that will provide for good jobs in the future. There's tremendous opportunity in clean energy that will produce really high-paying jobs for thousands of Californians. But in the meantime, while we are making the transition from fossil fuel economy to a clean energy future, we also have to maintain our education system so that the students of today are prepared to take those jobs. So I'm very optimistic about our future. I think that the County of Santa Barbara has done a great job of balancing these issues, and the experience and the relationships and the collaborations that I have been part of as a county supervisor. I want to take that experience to Sacramento to help our community make the transition into the future that we all want to see for our children and grandchildren.
I timed Mr. Hart with my watch because the electronic timer glitched for a moment, but I think we're back on track with it. All right. This time, the question will be answered first by Mr. Hart, and it is this. The Air Resources Board has adopted regulations to prohibit sales of gas-powered cars by 2035. How do you propose to implement transition to electric-powered vehicles? How do you propose to address negative consequences such as lost jobs, increased vehicle costs, as well as the increased demand for electricity?
Well, climate change is a reality that we're all facing. Living here in Santa Barbara and South San Luis Obispo counties, we know the effects of drought and wildfires all too well. The consequences are real. We've experienced them all ourselves, and we need to be preparing to address that issue as it comes forward. And the way to do that is to transition to clean burning fuels and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Electric vehicles are a critical component of that challenge and that transition. Obviously, making change that is so dramatic and so historic isn't going to be easy or painless. There's a process. It's not a straight path. But the innovations that are coming from the private sector, the improvements in the efficiency in electric vehicles, and the new improvements in the grid are all things that present tremendous opportunities. The new federal legislation that provides tax and credits and incentives to private companies to invest in this space are going to generate jobs and provide economic prosperity, both at the national level and at the local level. I was reading a report yesterday from Credit Suisse, who've analyzed the effects of that legislation, and they estimate that the potential for jobs that will come from that are almost equal to what happened with rural electrification in the United States many, many years ago. So I see this as a half-full cup. There obviously will need to be incentives for folks to make the transition to electric vehicles, but I drive an electric vehicle myself, and I can tell you it's a really great product and something that I think when people try, they will really enjoy.
Time. Mr. Stoker, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I got it.
you.
Hey, I'm all for electric vehicles and I'm all for sustainable energy, but you don't do it overnight. The Air Resources Board is often not part of the solution, they've been part of the problem. They're the reason why the Elon Musk of this state have left. And, you know, I did it in Santa Barbara County. Our regulatory agencies were regulating much too harshly, and we did it in a different way. In fact, we revised the Air Pollution Control District so they had to sit down with the businesses to get the input from the business how to best reduce emissions. And I was told how crazy that was, how anti-environmental that was. Guess what? 2 years after that policy, for the first time, Santa Barbara County was in attainment with the Federal Clean Air Act. The Air Resources Board needs to be more flexible. They're not flexible enough. They're where the Air Pollution Control Board was back in the late 1980s when I came to Santa Barbara County to turn things around. You know, as a former regional administrator for the U.S. EPA, you know, one of the EPA's big concerns is, if everybody had an electric car tomorrow, what are you going to do with those batteries? One of the most toxic things you have. We can't even dispose of nuclear waste right now because we have no depository. Those batteries can't go into our Class 2 landfills. You only have one Class 1 landfill in California. Not to mention, everybody forgets, you have to plug it in and get electricity. So I'm all for a transition. We need to do it right. We need to do it smart. We need to be behind it. But we can't drive this state and the economy. I mean, when Greg talks about how great our economy is, it's dwindling. We have an exit out for the first time in the last 3 years of businesses because of the regulations. We have to do it in a slower way, embrace sustainable energy, embrace electric cars, but realize you can't do it overnight. And the people that are running this state want to do it overnight, and it doesn't work.
Time. Thank you. Our next question deals with homelessness, mental health, and substance abuse. The governor's proposal to the crisis facing the state is CARE courts. That stands for Community Assistance, Recovery, and Empowerment. What is your view on CARE courts, and what else would you propose to address these issues?
Well, homelessness is really the moral.
I think CARE, there's a lot of value and a lot of benefits in CARE, but let me tell you what it doesn't do, and you should have probably asked on the homeless side. You know, I think Governor Reagan was a very good governor. He was a great president, but one of the worst things he did was close down our mental hospitals. I think at that time we had the one flew over cuckoo's nest, large institutions, and maybe it made sense, but it didn't make sense unless there was some type of transition. And what we didn't have then that we now have are health clinics, smaller neighborhood health clinics. We have to have, if you look at the homeless population, 2/3 of the homeless population has mental health issues. If we're ever going to deal with homelessness, we got to deal with mental health. And what I'll probably be one of the few Republicans, and I'll be joining with Democrats, and probably, I don't support a whole lot of bonds because I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'll support a bond to get mental health clinics built throughout the state, to have inpatient clinics that can bring the homeless in, get them assessed, get them on the meds they need, and then after 30 to 45 days, have outpatient care where they can come in and they can be maintained. If we're going to deal with homelessness, we have to deal with the mental health issue in the state of California.
Thank you. Mr. Hart, same question, please.
Well, homelessness is really the moral crisis of our time. We can't have neighbors living outdoors to the extent that has been happening since the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic required many of the shelters in our community to reduce their occupancy, to provide physical space distancing, and more folks are living in encampments. And we're trying at the county level to do outreach to those folks, to get them the services that they need. The CARE court idea is an innovative approach to try and get some of the folks who are suffering the most from mental illness and get them the treatment that they might not otherwise take advantage of. And I certainly support that proposal, but it's a very modest pilot program in its first inception. Really what's happening is, folks are finding themselves economically distressed, losing their jobs, paying too much for health care, and finding themselves out on the street and really with no place to go. We don't have enough affordable housing, and there's a great disconnect in our communities. So what we've been trying to do is connect people through outreach workers to bring them indoors into small, tiny cabin shelters. There's a brand new, very innovative program in downtown Santa Barbara and Lompoc that's showing great results. Because if you can get folks indoors and you can wrap them with the services, whether it be drug and alcohol treatment or vocational services, services or mental health services, you can turn people's lives around and get them reunited with family members and get them back on track. We've put 700 people who had previously been living on the streets in the last 2 years into affordable housing projects in the county of Santa Barbara and need to continue and invest in that in a big way at the state government level.
Thank you. Mr. Hart will start the next question. It deals with housing. How do you propose to balance state concerns for providing housing with local control over community land use issues? What laws would you change?
Well, the state has obviously a tremendous interest, as well as local governments, in solving the housing affordability challenge. It's one of the most difficult issues facing our state. Just recently, I was shopping in a grocery store, and the clerk who was checking me out told me that she had moved up here temporarily from living in the San Fernando Valley to cover shifts at this grocery store. And their employer was actually paying to put this person in a hotel room because they couldn't get enough local checkers to keep the store open and functioning. I think that points to the problem very acutely. And every employer that I speak to says they have jobs available for people, but they don't have folks who can afford to live here. So we have a supply and demand imbalance. We need to build more housing, and yet it needs to reflect the communities where it's going to be constructed. The state so far has been really doing kind of a top-down approach, mandating each local government's universal approach to housing. I think that there's tremendous creativity and resourcefulness at the local government level, and the city of Santa Barbara is a great example. For 30 years, the Housing Authority there has been a national leader. They just got an award just last week from a national architecture and community building organization. And the reason they were so successful is there has been a long time reliable funding stream from the state to the local housing authority to build affordable housing. That was abandoned during the last recession, and that funding was cut. So now we rely on grants that are sporadic and erratic. We need to have a reliable funding stream for affordable housing construction at the local level.
Mr. Stoker.
Well, I love it. When I started my career, as I mentioned in my opening comments as a county supervisor, all the folks now that are talking about housing shortages were the ones that called me pro-growth Stoker, because I wanted homes to be built. They were no-growthers. They didn't want any homes. And now we're having the consequences of that policies. The bottom line is there's a couple things we can do. Through CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, we can do fast tracking for housing projects with master EIRs and things of that nature to make it much more easier and less expensive for developers to build those homes. But I think a big focus that we have to look at that can take a major part of the problem away is if we were to have a lot of policies at the state level and potentially preempt local government, just as we mandate granny flats, that local government has to allow granny flats to be allowed. We need to do a lot more with mobile home parks. Mobile home parks, for every one that gets built, 10 are being taken down. Mobile home parks and mobile home communities are your more affordable housing. And the bottom line is, if we were, again, through CEQA, to allow for developers to have fast tracking and it costs less money, I think mobile home parks are going to be the kind of thing that can be developed, and they're now mobile home communities. You can drive into them. They look like a regular neighborhood. But again, keep in mind, the same people now today talking about the housing shortage were the ones that were 10, 20, 30 years ago, were the ones that were saying no growth, no growth. You can't have it both ways. I've been consistent all my life. I've been for reasonable, managed growth within the urban boundary line.
Time. And Mr. Stoker will start the next question. Do you think that recent changes to the justice system, specifically Proposition 47, which recategorized nonviolent offenses as misdemeanors, and AB 109, realignment, shifting correctional responsibility from state to counties, have been beneficial or harmful to public safety? What changes, if any, would you support?
No, I think it's been harmful. I think we need to get back to having a 3 strikes, you're out system. The main thing we need to be doing is you don't let criminals out of jail. You know, you don't have early release. I opened in my opening comments. The bottom line is, you know, the irony was with COVID, we had a whole lot of convicts, billions of dollars went to them in COVID relief. And because of the fraud that went on within the unemployment office, we're letting thousands and thousands and thousands of inmates out on early release in this state that we wouldn't have 10, 20, 30 years ago. We also have, this is the most important thing, when you're a criminal and you see these people breaking the window and stealing the jewelry and stealing the radios, and they're let free. They're literally, it's catch and release. They give them a citation. 10, 20 years ago, you went into you were arrested. You were, do the crime, do your time. And we're not going to solve the problems with crime in this state or this country unless we make criminals that commit crimes pay the price. And that's not with letting them out of jail early, and that's not with when they get, when they commit a crime and they're arrested, just giving them a citation to appear in court. That's the consequences of those policies. That's why crime goes up. If you think you can get away with it, there's criminals out there that are going to take advantage of it, and that's what we got to stop. And that's also why I mentioned why I have law enforcement supporting me in this election and the Deputy Sheriff's Association.
Mr. Hart, same question.
I'm very proud to have the support of many law enforcement organizations, including the California Highway Patrol, the California Coalition for Law Enforcement Agencies, the Santa Barbara Police Officers Association, and District Attorney John Savernock, who was recently elected to serve in that post. The reason for my support from law enforcement is that I understand the men and women who are working to protect us every day need the resources to do their job. In the 17 years that I've been elected official, every single budget that I've approved has increased funding for law enforcement. That's why I have law enforcement support, because I understand directly that there's a very difficult job that they do, and they have to have the resources and the support from elected officials to do that difficult job. Violent criminals need to be in prison. There are many people who are committing low-level offenses who should be receiving the services to turn their lives around. Many of the prisoners in the current county jail right now suffer from significant mental health issues, and they are not getting the services that they need. We need to invest in vocational education, mental health treatment, drug and alcohol treatment, to try and get people back on track to be productive members of our society. It doesn't work to lock everybody up, but it's critically important to lock up the people that pose a public safety threat. In addition, we don't spend enough time focusing on the victims of crime. When you talk to victims, what they're really looking for is restitution and justice. And our system, unfortunately, doesn't work for law enforcement. It doesn't work for the victims of crime.
Thank you. Mr. Hart will start the next question. What needs to be done to meet the water needs of all Californians, including agricultural uses, urban uses, providing potable water, taking into account environmental issues and endangered species protection?
The most important part of a water strategy is diversity. We need to have a very diverse water portfolio in the state level and at the county level and at the local municipal level. As a city council member, I was very proud to have led efforts to address the drought by doing exactly that, having one of the most diverse water portfolios in the state of California, here in the city of Santa Barbara, and also at the county level. We have groundwater availability, we have Lake Cachuma and the surface reservoirs, we have state water, we have reclamation facilities, and we have conservation in a really aggressive way. Our residents understand that we live in an arid area and need to make sure that every drop of water is precious. We need to have those same philosophies and an approach at the state level. And in addition, desalination is a key component of the city of Santa Barbara's water supply. And before the last drought, the city moved very quickly to recreate the desalination facility that had been mothballed. And I led that effort, and it is now a regional facility that serves both the city of Santa Barbara and Montecito, and has the permitted capacity to serve twice as many customers as are currently being used by that facility. To make it environmentally sustainable, it should be running on renewable energy, and that's the next challenge for us, to have that facility. But that strategy employed at the state level could provide tremendous drought-proof water supply that can provide environmental benefits as well.
Mr. Stoker, same question.
Yeah, well, first, just to remind you, the 500 men and women that put their lives on the line every day for the Deputy Sheriff's Association, or the Deputy Sheriffs of this county, have endorsed my candidacy. As for water, I agree about diversity. The problem is the people that say in the state they want diversity have never allowed us to build reservoirs. We haven't built a reservoir since the 1960s with Governor Pat Brown. I've been giving speeches for 30 years. We don't have a water shortage problem. We have a water storage problem. We built a water delivery system for 20 million people, now serving 40 million people. We've done a pretty good job without having built any of those reservoirs. And by the way, when we originally delivered that water, 100% went to Northern California to Central California and Southern California to agriculture, to industrial, to residential. Now we divert, even in drought years, up to 30% of that water to the Pacific Ocean for endangered species purposes. We need diversity. We shouldn't be diverting that water in times of drought. And we need to build more reservoirs. And you know, what we have in Sacramento right now, the majority do not want reservoirs built, even though they tell you they want diversity. As I said in my opening comments, I want desalination too. I want as many water resources in the water basket, and that's the only way you're going to make more water readily available for all California residents.
Thank you. Mr. Stoker will start the next question. What is your plan to ensure California and the Central Coast have a functioning, effective infrastructure?
Well, it starts with not diverting a lot of our money that was intended for infrastructure away from infrastructure. If you go back in the old days and you look at the tax on gas at the pump, the bottom line is that went to infrastructure, not anymore. If you look at the budget, go look at the state budget and go look at what's been diverted away from our roads, our infrastructure. I just talked about reservoirs. That's infrastructure. We're not building that. We passed all kinds of bonds over the last 20 years, and they implied we were going to build reservoirs. They kind of conned the voters that they were going to build reservoirs, and then they diverted it for environmental projects that had nothing to do with reservoirs. You know, if you want to have money if you want infrastructure taken care of, you got to pay for it. And if you want to pay for it, you have to make it a priority. But the people running this state have not made infrastructure a priority. They've made a lot of social programs priority. They've made a lot of environmental programs priority. They've made a lot of things for sustainable energy and trying to make that transition immediately from a carbon-based energy society to a renewable energy-based society. They haven't made infrastructure a priority. As your assemblyman, you can count on me to make infrastructure one of your #1 priorities.
Mr. Hart, same question.
Well, I have a great deal of experience in this area because I worked at the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments for 15 years, leading the efforts to invest in local transportation infrastructure. And I can say we have absolutely turned things around here in our county. I think every one of us who's driving on any streets knows that the streets are all under construction because of a new infusion of dollars to make improvements. There was a tremendous backlog of needed repairs, streets and roads, fixing potholes, and that is absolutely being addressed right now, both at the city level, the county level. The pavement measurement that judges the quality of pavement at the county level has gone up while I'm a member of the Board of Supervisors. And at the state level, there are major highway projects happening all over the state of California. Here locally, the widening of the 101 freeway has been in the works for 20 years. That project is now about 5 years from completion, and you can drive along the highway right now and see the progress that's being made. Those investments are critical to maintaining the productivity of our economy. The agricultural products that are grown in the Santa Maria Valley need to get to market. The tourists that come and bring jobs and dollars into our community need to be able to access our community without being choked by traffic congestion. So I think the investments that are currently being made are exactly what needs to continue into the future to improve the quality of life of all of our residents in Santa Barbara County, San Luis Obispo County, and the state of California.
Thank you. Mr. Hart will start the next question. Climate change seems to be increasing the severity and frequency of natural disasters such as wildfires and floods. What does the legislature need to do to ensure that the state has adequate emergency services for dealing with natural and man-made disasters?
Well, we have a lot to teach the state of California, unfortunately, here from our perspective. We live this reality. Wildfires are a regularly occurring thing in our county and in San Luis Obispo County. And our firefighters have developed the best mutual aid response system in the world. The state of California has the most sophisticated firefighting effort of any place in the world. Other countries come here to learn about the expertise that we've developed over generations of fighting fires. The most current science about fighting fires is that we need to do a better job of fuels management, and there's some very innovative things going on in the Gaviota Coast specifically. The Land Trust for the Santa Barbara County got a grant from the state fire agencies to do grazing mitigation on their lands. And when the most recent fire came through, there is dramatic visual proof about here's the area that was grazed by goats, no damage from the fire literally stopped at the edge where the grazing occurred, and then in the areas where the grazing wasn't done, the vegetation was burned disastrously that led to mud flows and things like that. So there needs to be more investment from the state to give to local governments to make those improvements. And one of the most important investments that we made at the county level was to buy a military surplus grade helicopter called a Firehawk that has been deployed in 4 fires this year. Each one of those fires was stopped within 5 acres using this new advanced tool. And it's the best thing we have available to protect our homes and livelihoods right now in Santa Barbara County.
Mr. Stoker, same question?
Well, I like to give credit where credit's due, and I pretty much agree with everything Greg just said. I would add to that, you need to do a whole lot more clearing of dead wood, and we don't do that with the Forest Service, so we need to do a lot more of it. And there's also a lot, it's been scientifically proven, there's places you should have let burn policies, let it burn, because then you will burn out the undergrowth, and when you don't let those fires burn out naturally, and we just allow all the vegetation to grow and grow and grow. When they have a fire, it's so hot it goes out of control. So that's what I would add on that. I want to say one thing, though. When Greg mentioned the 101 widening, what you all need to know, folks, when I was on the Board of Supervisors in 1991, the Association of Governments, we had Caltrans, an approved 6-lane project freeway. But it was paid for. It had been approved. The EIR had been certified. It was ready to go. And the Association of Governments that Greg was the executive, he wasn't at the time, but that's what he referenced. They had a vote. And Association of Governments are all 5 county supervisors and a representative from every city. I was shot down. I was saying, we need to build this freeway. And the environmental community said, no, it's growth inducing. And the supervisor from the 1st District at that time, Naomi Swartz, opposed it. So it was voted down on a 14-to-1 vote. And I told those folks then that was the dumbest vote they ever made in their lives, and they would regret it. Now, 20 years later, at 7 times the cost and 5 times the length or the time period to build it, we're building that freeway that could have been built in 1991 under my leadership.
Time. Mr. Stoker will begin the next question. In light of the Dobbs decision, do you support any changes to California law regarding reproductive freedom? Do you support Proposition 1 on the November ballot, which would codify a right to abortion in California?
No, I think Proposition 1 is morally unconscionable that it's on the ballot. You know why? Because it's already a constitutional right in the state of California. It was a constitutional right by initiative in 1974. It was reaffirmed in 1981 by the Supreme Court of California that it was a constitutional right. And our politicians in Sacramento are playing games by putting something that's so sensitive in the morality of that issue and convincing voters that we need to vote for this so you'll have a right when you already have a right. And they're only doing it for one reason. The Democrats are trying to up voter turnout. And I've made it very clear all my life, I'm not going to overturn any laws. I wasn't going to overturn Roe versus Wade. It was the law in the book. I'm not going to overturn the current constitutional right that a woman has to have a right to abortion that you don't need Proposition 1 for. But I'll tell you what I will do. Every time they play these games, the one thing that I do disagree with the majority in the state, parents should have a right to give consent so their 12-year-old daughter can't go to Planned Parenthood and the Planned Parenthood tell them, your mom and dad really don't know what's best for you. You can have an abortion and mom and dad don't have a right to know about it. I think that is morally unconscionable as well. So the right to an abortion for women, it's there. I'm not going to oppose it. I have always supported that, and I was never going to oppose the laws on the books, whether it was Roe versus Wade or the current proposition, but I do support parents having the right to give consent.
Wait. Please hold your applause. Thank you. Mr. Hart, same question?
I strongly support Proposition 1. The decision by the United States Supreme Court to strip away women's rights to control their own bodies and to have safe and legal access to abortion is a travesty of justice. This is the first time in our lives that the Supreme Court has rolled back basic fundamental rights of women. And we need to step up in California and pass Proposition 1 and constitutionally protect that right. I've been a strong proponent of women's reproductive freedom at every elected office that I've held, and it is the reason why I have the support, the only candidate in this race to have the support of Planned Parenthood, because I have a record of success and achievement in protecting those rights. And this is a moment in history where all of us will have the chance in November. The Proposition 1 is the very first thing on your ballot, and it's there for a reason, because it is so important. I strongly support its passage and urge everyone to vote yes on Proposition 1.
Thank you. The next one will be started with Mr. Hart. What will you do to ensure an opportunity for all eligible citizens to register and vote, and to ensure the security of California elections?
Well, we're living through a time where divisiveness in politics has reached new highs and new lows, and it's very concerning. And I think all of us share the belief that we can work collaboratively together to solve problems productively. That's what I've tried to do as a local elected official. We have a very collegial relationship on the Board of Supervisors with widely different ideological views. And the reason we are successful in working together is because we have respect and we treat each other civilly. I don't find in my interactions with people that being aggressive and attacking folks is a good prescription for making progress and getting things done. And I think the way we model our behavior as elected officials to the young people in our communities makes a difference and shows them the way that they ought to be behaving as political actors in our system. So whenever I go speak to community colleges or university students, I'm honestly impressed and amazed at the next generation of leaders that are coming forward. And I'm kind of sometimes embarrassed by folks in our generation who haven't figured out the basic fundamentals of fairness and civility. So I think the most important thing that I would like to do as an elected official is to model that kind of behavior for students, for everybody in our community, because I honestly believe if we're going to accomplish anything, and the many issues that we've talked about tonight are pressing and urgent, we're going to have to work together, roll up our sleeves, and get things done, because that's the only way things are ever accomplished.
Time.
Can you repeat the question? 'Cause
Certainly.
from the answer, maybe I got the question wrong.
Okay. What will you do to ensure opportunity for all eligible citizens to register and vote, and to ensure the security of California elections?
Well, I mean, what we need to do is do what we've been doing, and that's to have voter registrations, make it very easy. Joe Holland in this county does a very good job of doing that, mailing it out. So I don't think we have a problem on getting people registered. Back on the security side of it, I think we got to do a better job. When you're going to a system that everybody's getting a mail ballot, it overwhelms the system. And that means everybody's now sending in a ballot that they have to sign. And what we really have to do to up the ante, so nobody's calling into questions elections, and nobody's saying that there was voter fraud and that kind of thing, is we have to do a better system making sure that the signature on that ballot, when it goes to the elections office, matches the signature on file. Because otherwise, people that get a ballot can sign the ballot on the outside of the envelope, but they're not necessarily the registered voter for the signature on the file. So we have to do a lot better job in this state, especially since we've gone to mail ballots, universally, to make sure that those signatures on that envelope match. And again on Prop 1, because this really concerns me. Don't believe when people tell you that Roe versus Wade took away your rights in California. It did in other states, but not here. A woman has a right to an abortion, a constitutional right on Article 1, Section 1, that was put in place in 1974, and the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court in 1981, Committee to Defend Reproductive Rights versus Myers, stated, quote, under Article 1, Section 1 of the California Constitution, all women in this state, rich and poor alike, possess a fundamental constitutional right to choose whether or not to bear a child.
Time.
That's the constitutional right all you women
Time.
have, and I support in this state.
The next question will begin with Mr. Stoker. What do you support to preserve productive agricultural land and environmental resources?
Well, you go back to my years on the Board of Supervisors, I was known as the guy that fought for agriculture, and all the people that claimed they cared so much about agriculture were again passing a lot of regulations that was making it really tough for our agriculture to stay in business. We haven't done back to water. You want to have agriculture, you better have water. You want water, you better have the diversity that you've heard about tonight, but diversity means you also build reservoirs that the people in Sacramento, the majority, don't want to build. So if you want to have, go up I-5 when you're driving. What do those farmers put on their farmland? Water means food. No water means no food. You can't have it both ways. You can't have a water delivery system for 20 million people, designed for 20 million, that's serving 40 million and diverting 30% of it because of the Delta smelt and endangered species purposes. And you know who gets the water cut off first under the state water agreements? It's agriculture. So if you want to walk the walk and talk the talk, then you better really believe in diversity for water, and diversity for water means you're going to build more reservoirs in the state of California to go along with those desalination plants along the coast.
Thank you. Mr. Hart, same question, please.
Agriculture is one of the foundational industries in Santa Barbara County, in San Luis Obispo County, and also in the state of California. We're really the breadbasket of the United States. And the reason why is we have innovative, entrepreneurial farmers and ranchers who know how to innovate and how to diversify their crops. And the best thing that can happen is for government to respect that expertise and to stay out of the way and allow agriculture to do the work that they need to do. In Santa Barbara County, our crop production has been expanding every year. It's about a $3 billion industry now between San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. And the innovation and the crop management and the changes in agriculture are profound and really inspirational. The second largest crop in Santa Barbara County today are nursery products. That wasn't even in the top 10 5 years ago. And that's because local farmers are able to pivot and grow different crops to meet the demand that occurs. So we've transitioned away from cut flowers to other crops, and nursery products are one of the most productive opportunities for growth in the agriculture industry today.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Mr. Hart. What is your plan for health care for all Californians, including coronavirus response and long-term health care plan?
Well, the pandemic has really illustrated the health inequities that exist in our country and our state. And unfortunately, the response to the pandemic has been very uneven, and the services that are required by those communities has been difficult to deliver. But we've created new partnerships with those communities in the Santa Barbara County, reaching out to trusted messengers to get health care to communities that haven't historically had the same kind of access to health care. But all of us are concerned about rising costs. And I just recently had a surgical procedure and got a $40,000 bill for an outpatient surgery. Those kind of bills are unsustainable. So we need to evolve the system toward a Medicare for all system where everyone has access to quality health care at affordable rates. It's not easy to make that transition. The federal government has to give a waiver to the state of California to make that transition. But working incrementally, expanding access through Medi-Cal, as the state legislature has been doing for many years, has really increased the availability and accessibility to health insurance in the state of California. At the national level, the ACA went a long way, and yet we've seen continuously increasing prices, eroding access. So the first priority at the state level is to continue that work, the innovation that we're doing to get health care into communities of color and to all Californians is essential to make progress, to having a healthy population that protects all of us and from a public health standpoint.
Thank you. Mr. Stoker, same question, please.
Well, first off, on the other question, I think that transition from cut flowers would be cannabis. I'm just saying. On healthcare, we have a pretty good job. We do a pretty good job for access here. The problem is cost. And if any politician running for the state office wants to tell you they have these great plans on how they're going to bring costs down, then they're just like a typical politician telling you what you want to hear. Because healthcare costs are driven by national policies. That would be a question that somebody running for Congress, maybe Dr. Brad Allen, would want to weigh in on as a doctor. But it's your national policies that are creating the cost overall. I can tell you one thing California could do, and I would support. Majority in Sacramento won't, because the Trial Lawyers Association have them, completely bought and paid for. We need more tort reform in California, because right now, in terms of product liability lawsuits, you know, the amount of award is astronomical in California. We need to have more limits on it, which you can do through tort reform. And if you have those costs, you could then have those costs that are saved by having less billion-dollar verdicts paid out that the drug manufacturers and the companies then pass on to you in higher drug costs. So the one thing California can do is tort reform. The rest, if we're going to really lower the costs in terms of healthcare costs, has to be done at the national level.
Okay. The next question is our final official question, and we will start with Mr. Stoker. What is your advice to new voters, the future leaders of America, about how to participate in our democracy?
Well, vote. Why I stepped up for the fourth time in my life? I was not going to run. I wanted other people to run. People like Brooks Firestone, the last assemblyman from Santa Barbara, urged me to run. Jordan Cunningham, the current assemblyman in northern Santa Barbara County, who are both my co-chairs, wanted me to run. And I said, hey, I just got my first Social Security check last March. I was ready to retire, enjoy my wife, enjoy my life, happy wife, happy life, vacation and have a good time. But I've always stepped up for public service. And my wife was the one that said, Mike, you're the one that always goes, if you don't have a right to complain unless you do whatever you can to change it. She said, for some people, it's at least vote. If you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain. For others, it's like you. Be active, help get your person supported and elected, whether it's Greg or me. And she said, for a handful, it's being the candidate. That's you. And after a lot of prayer and deliberation, that's when I decided to step up to the plate. So, all I can do is encourage everyone to vote, whether you're voting for Greg, whether you're voting for me. You have to participate. And I'd urge all those that want to see me be your assemblyman, go to stokerforassembly.com and sign up and help out the cause as much as you can. But get involved in the election process.
Thank you.
I agree with Mr. Stoker about the urgency of voting. I think that is a fundamental step that obviously everybody should take. And I respect Mr. Stoker's public service, too. I think that being involved in government and being connected to your community and serving your community is a really important value. I was raised in a family that valued public service. My mother was an elementary school teacher, and my father was the librarian for first the Lompoc City Library and then the City of Santa Barbara and the County Library. And reading was always really important in our family. And I think that political action starts with being informed and being knowledgeable about what's happening in your community. And unfortunately, too many people are getting their information from very unreliable sources these days. So I would urge people to go back to the core standard sources of information, read books, read newspapers. The major newspapers in our country are still doing outstanding journalistic work, but please don't rely on the internet, don't rely on television news, to give you the facts that you need to be an informed voter and an active participant in our democracy. Get the information that you need to make the decisions on your own, and having an informed electorate is what makes for good public policy and elected officials that can be held accountable to the facts and the real issues that are confronting our community on a daily basis.
Boy, a lot of you had questions. We have had to sort and consolidate. There were also, I will say, a number of questions that were very specific to very local issues here in the city of Santa Barbara, and we have gone for questions that have a more statewide import, since this is a position at the state level. So if your question didn't get answered or didn't get used here, I apologize. We could not get to all of them. I'm sure that both of the candidates would welcome you sending your questions to them directly, so that they can let you know what they think. All right, first question from the audience. Guidance from the CDC continues to recommend relaxing of mask mandates nationwide. What is your stance on mask and vaccine mandates in California? And for this, we will begin with Mr. Hart.
Well, the pandemic was probably the most difficult thing in all of our lives. I was talking about this with my 92-year-old former mother-in-law, and I asked her, you've lived through incredible things in your life. You were born before the Depression, you lived through World War II, you've seen incredible recessions in your life. How does the pandemic stack up to those things? And she said with clarity, it's the hardest thing that she ever experienced because we were not able to get together for a long period of time. And that's been very tough. And the new evidence that came forward over time that contradicted earlier direction has made this particularly difficult. As chair of the Board of Supervisors, I had the responsibility of providing public information to our community during the pandemic. And I really tried to be very careful with what I said and to be very inclusive in my message and to try to speak to every single member of our community. And that was a difficult job, but I think I did it well. People have told me since then that they appreciated the approach that I took, the calm, reasoned way that I presented information. And so I think that is informing us today. What are we going to do individually about making decisions? The situation today is very different than it was at the beginning of the pandemic, and each of us has to make a decision about what we're going to do to protect ourselves and our family.
Time. Mr. Stoker, same question, please.
Well, what we did 2 years ago was then. What we do now is let's get back to normal. The bottom line is I completely was opposed to the county policy that if you didn't get a vaccine, it was, pursuant to the OSHA order that was issued, you don't get a vaccine, you lose your job. I don't think anybody should lose a job or their education because you choose your personal, we talked a lot about a person having a right to make a choice on their body tonight. What about a choice on your body for a vaccine? And we got to get back to being normal again. I commend the league. This is like the first real forum where people can come to and see the candidates. Everybody else is doing it by Zoom still. Let's get back to normal. Somebody that feels at risk can wear a mask. If you don't feel comfortable going somewhere because you don't know if somebody's vaccinated, participate by Zoom. This gives me an opportunity to plug my wife. My wife said, don't complain unless you step up to the plate. She came to me when people said run for the Board of Trustees for City College. Our City College is one of the only city colleges left in the state. They won't let our kids go to City College unless they have a vaccine and wear a mask. 5,000 kids are not going because they don't want the vaccine or the mask. I say respect a person's decision on your body that we want to talk so much about. People that feel at risk participate by Zoom. People that want to wear a mask. But let's get back to being normal. And again, I commend the League of Women Voters for having a normal forum where people can come like you are today.
Hold your applause, please. Our next question, we will start with Mr. Stoker. Do you support efforts to protect the California coastline, including the Gaviota Coast, and generally to preserve open spaces?
Do I protect the California coast from the Gaviota?
No.
Say that. I have hearing aids and I don't always hear.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My husband
I've
does
become
too.
an old man,
I understand. Do you support efforts to protect the California coastline, including the Gaviota Coast, and generally to preserve open spaces?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I was the guy that was the agricultural attorney, not for cannabis, but for normal crops, and we went up from 1986 to 1994, because that's one of the best ways to preserve open space. That's private sector farmers maintaining open space. I've always protected the California coast. I always will fight for efforts to protect the California coast. I think we're doing a very, very good job of it. I think, I'm a conservationist in the spirit of Teddy Roosevelt. What we do is we protect the coast, and then we don't let people have access to it. A conservationist wants to protect the environment and make it available to you to enjoy. That's a big difference between a lot of the environmentalists in the state of California that want to protect the coast but not give you any access. I want to protect the coast and give you full access, like my wife wants to do to give our students full access to Santa Barbara City College.
Mr. Hart, ladies and gentlemen, please hold your applause. It just cuts into the time the candidates have to answer the questions. Mr. Hart, same question.
Well, I served for 4 years on the California Coastal Commission because I have a deep passion for respecting our environment and coastal protection. We have one of the most rich marine environments in the world off our coast, and we have an obligation to preserve and protect that habitat. for future generations. And I think it's an incredible economic asset here in our community in the state of California. People all over the world recognize California for its coastal resources, and yet they're always fragile and in jeopardy. We've experienced ourselves huge oil spills in our lifetimes, most recently not that many years ago. And so I'm strongly opposed to offshore oil drilling. I'm opposed to restarting the oil rigs and trucking that oil across the country, the county, because it presents a real safety hazard. And my environmental record is so extensive and is so clear that I'm the only candidate in this race that has the support of the California Sierra Club.
Thank you. Next question. We start with Mr. Hart. What is your position on the ongoing pressure to eliminate Prop 13 and the resulting potential hardship on seniors and lower-income homeowners?
Well, let me be clear. I strongly support the Prop 13 protections for homeowners. I have no intention of touching that. It's critical to protect people who are living in their homes on fixed incomes. My mother is a beneficiary of the Prop 13 protections. There is an issue with the unfairness between private property, residential properties, and commercial properties. In 1979, when Prop 13 was first passed, 2/3 of the property tax burden was borne by corporations and businesses. Today, 2/3 of that burden is borne by homeowners, and only 1/3 is borne by corporations. That's because people move and regularly get their property tax reassessed, and that property tax goes up. So there are many, many instances where residences next door to each other have vastly different property tax rates. The real beneficiary of that system, where assessments only occur when properties are exchanged, are companies and businesses that don't move. That's an issue that needs to be addressed, and there's an equity issue that all of us have a stake in resolving.
Thank you. Mr. Stoker, same question.
Well, we talked earlier about protecting all those small businesses in California. Take away their Prop 13 protections and pay those astronomical tax bills, and watch how many more small businesses go out of business or move to another state. I don't support revising Prop 13 in any way, shape, or form. The voters passed it for a specific reason in 1978, and I'm going to continue to fight that battle. Normally a non-incumbent, it takes Howard Jarvis 3 to 5 months to make a decision whether to endorse. I announced on a Friday, and on Monday, 3 days later, John Capal, the president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, said, "Mike, you got our endorsement. There'd be no better advocate for the taxpayer in Sacramento." And as for small businesses, I also have the endorsement of the National Federation of Independent Businesses, which represent the largest association in California representing small business. So what I can tell you, this is also, when you go to Sacramento, the kind of people that vote for taxes and fee increases and benefit assessments all the time, take away your Prop 13 protection today for the commercial properties, and they're coming after residential properties tomorrow. I guarantee it.
Thank you. Next question. We start with Mr. Stoker. What would you do to induce power companies to allow rooftop solar to flow back into the grid?
What would I have hearing aid issue in this room.
Okay. As an assembly member, what would you do to induce power companies to allow rooftop solar to flow back into the grid?
What we should have done is not back in 2002 when we took the energy companies out of the energy business. California is basically now the one that's in the energy business. As far as, you know what, I'll be honest with you folks, getting solar panels on your homes is not going to be a real top priority of mine as your assemblyman. You got a lot of programs out there right now. Take advantage of it. I'm going to be going to Sacramento to fight for taxpayers and small businesses and law enforcement and parents and smart energy prices that will lower the cost of gas at the pump and water policies that will make more water readily available. Solar panels on your rooftop is not going to register as a real high and top priority of me as your assemblyman. I'm just being real honest with you.
Mr. Hart.
Well, climate change is an existential threat to all of us that we do need to weigh in on this issue, and providing financial incentives to make solar power more accessible to more homeowners is a critical part of California's evolving energy policy. I think that that's almost a accepted strategy. I haven't heard of folks who are opposed to solar energy and rooftop solar. We actually live at the end of the grid that Southern California Edison provides, that comes up from Southern California. The lines end in Santa Barbara County, and we have a real reliability problem. If those lines are severed by an earthquake or a natural disaster, our power is going to be cut off to this part of the state. The northern part of Santa Barbara County and southern San Luis Obispo County is likewise at the end of the PGE line, and they have the same vulnerabilities. So by providing decentralized solar on rooftops in communities, we provide resiliency and protection against power outages. So to me, I think those kind of investments make perfect sense. They make financial sense for homeowners, particularly now with the new federal tax and credits. So I think these issues are defining. I think they're important, and I will devote a lot of attention to these issues as a member of the state legislature.
Thank you. That was our last question because we have to have time for the candidates' closing statements and my closing remarks. Since Mr. Hart started the opening statement, Mr. Stoker will begin the closing statements. Let me set my timer. Mr. Stoker?
Well,
begin.
again, I want to thank the league for having a real forum that people could come to and not a Zoom debate or forum. I mean, this is a step in getting us back to living our lives in a normal way. You know, I've made it very clear, you know, I'm going to make sure that parents and law enforcement, small businesses, taxpayers, you'll always have my back, or I'll have your back. I'll always be there to fight for you. I'm never going to let you down. I'm going to fight for the smart energy policies. I'm all for solar. And I think people should take advantage of those policies. But you know what I'll put more energy into? Making sure our state doesn't take away natural gas, which is going to only make more rolling blackouts, probably double the price of energy that we pay on our energy bills. And I'm going to fight for smart water policies. You know, there's a difference between a public servant and a politician. I've been giving this line for 30 years. Public servant, it's the worst paying job they've ever had, and they have a real job to go to in the real world if they don't win the election or re-election. The politician, it's the best paying job they have, and they don't have a real job. And the problem with politicians, and we have them on both sides of the aisle, they're beholden to the people that contribute to them. They're beholden to their special interests. They never say no to them. They march to the tune of their party. They march to the tune of their leadership. The public servant, because it's the worst paying job they've had, they're not beholden to anybody. That's how I've always been. I've always been a maverick. I've always stood up against my party. I do the right thing, and I'm never going to be beholden to any special interest. And so, you know, this is an important election. If you think California's headed in the right direction, don't vote for me. I'm not your guy. If you think California's voted in the wrong direction and you want to have the taxpayers and law enforcement and parents and small businesses represented in Sacramento, I'm your guy. I'm Mike Stoker, and I'd be proud to have your vote and your support on November 8th. Thank you.
Perfectly timed. Exactly 2 minutes. Okay, Mr. Hart, your 2 minutes.
Well, I just appreciate everybody being here and the folks who are watching on television and the League of Women Voters for giving us this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the issues that we really feel passionate about. And I want to end with a little story that I think tells you a little bit about me and my determination. About a month ago, I was going to a candidate interview meeting in Northern California, and I was at the Santa Barbara airport, and the flight was at 6 a.m., and I was a little bit late, and I was a little bit stressed, and I was rushing. And as I was walking really fast through the parking lot at the airport, I thought I would take a minute to look at my phone to check my boarding pass. And I pulled it up and was looking intently at that, and I walked full speed into the side of a parked panel truck. The first thing that happened is my nose hit. It started bleeding profusely. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid it was going to get all over my suit. So I walked into the bathroom and tried to put toilet paper and tissue paper on my nose. And if any of you have had an injury to your face, you know there's a lot of blood in your face, and it wouldn't stop. So 15 minutes later, I realized, well, now I'm really going to miss this plane, so I better do something. So I took the toilet paper and the tissue paper on my nose, got in line with TSA, and this kind woman next to me was horrified and said, well, just put this surgical mask on to hold the tissue paper back against your nose so you can have your hands, you can get through the TSA. I did successfully. I got to where I was trying to go, and about 2.5 hours later, I'm trying to talk to this group, and I realize all of this is congealed on my nose, and that if I try and pull it apart, it's all going to start bleeding together. So I didn't know what to do, and I thought, well, I'm just going to tell the truth. So I told the whole gory story, and then I said to them, I'm the only candidate who can say that I walked through a parked truck to be with you today. They thought it was funny and memorable too, and that's the kind of fighter that I'll be as your representative in the California State Assembly. My name is Greg Hart. I would be honored to have your vote.
Three seconds under time. Well done. All right. Again, we want to thank the Santa Barbara Women's Club for allowing us to use their wonderful facility, to TV Santa Barbara for the video, Gary Atkins Sound Systems for the audio, Transil Pro for the translation services, our co-sponsors, the Santa Barbara Goleta Valley AAUW, Future Leaders of America, and the Santa Maria Valley League of Women Voters, and all the volunteers of the League who helped with this forum. And thank you to the candidates for joining us this evening. We appreciate your commitment to serve your community. We thank you to everyone here and at home who has listened to this forum. We hope you found the program informative and useful as you prepare to vote. We will be discussing the pros and cons of the 7 statewide propositions that will appear on your November ballot at a virtual forum on Thursday, October 13th at 6 p.m. This will be broadcast from the TVSB studio. If you have questions about any of these measures, email them to voterservice, all one word, at lwvsantabarbara.org. Go to the League website, lwvsantabarbara.org, for more information about this virtual forum. Finally, please make sure you are correctly registered to vote, and vote. Your vote matters. Mail-in ballots will be mailed to the community beginning on Monday, October 10th. You can mail them in or drop them off at designated places. Information on where you can drop off your ballot instead of mailing it, the addresses of all the county drop-off boxes, and the locations where you can vote in person if you so choose will be included in the packet of information you receive with your ballot. And one last forum I would like to inform you about. On Tuesday, October 11th, 2022, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara at 1535 Santa Barbara Street, there will be a Santa Barbara Unified School District Candidates Forum co-sponsored by the League and the Future Leaders of America. We hope to see you there, and the organizers and moderators of that forum are students of the Santa Barbara District. So we thank you very much for coming, and good night. And we ended at exactly 7:30.